Welcome to the Future of Impact, a show where we create solutions and build a world where missions, metrics, and incentives align to actually get problems solved. We are on a mission to find innovative ways to accelerate change and make impact in industry. But we can't do it without the right metrics, and we can't do it alone. This is not a job for one or even a few. We all stand to succeed by working together. We are the future of impact. I'm your host, Jess Merrill. Let's get started. I am very excited for today's guest, Steve Latham, the co-founder and CEO of Donate Stock. Steve perfectly bridges the nonprofit and for-profit sectors in his company today, and as you'll hear with his background prior to that, he is a serial entrepreneur who spent the last 25 years in finance, digital marketing, and advanced analytics. Before founding Donate Stock in 2020, he founded and grew 2 digital marketing technology companies, as well as 2 nonprofits. Steve is a frequent speaker and contributing author and a lifelong supporter, fundraiser, and volunteer for many worthy causes. As CEO of Donate Stock, his personal mission is to democratize charitable stock gifting. Steve, thank you so much for being here today and just really looking forward to this conversation.
Thanks for having me, Jess.
Awesome. So, one of the big things that I'm excited to talk about with you uniquely, we talk about this a lot, with different guests, but to hear your point of view is the importance of innovation in the impact sector and more specifically the nonprofit sector. And just to really hear your unique point of view being a leader in the industry. So excited to get to that. But first, we always like to start kind of with, your why, your purpose, and your unique path to where you are today, if you are willing to share that with us.
Sure. Yeah. So I started my career in finance. I was an analyst after undergrad, and then after business school went into private equity. And I always loved financial markets, stocks, investing, et cetera. I also grew up in my mom worked for American Cancer Society. She was a executive director, which really meant fundraiser. So I grew up working golf tournaments and doing like local fundraisers. So that was always kind of part of my ethos as well, is giving back kind of along the way, not waiting till end of life, but to contribute as you go, coaching, things like that. And then I like a lot of people back in tech boom, really got excited about technology and startups, and spent about the last 23 years now in kind of early stage technology companies. And but I've always thought about, like, as I approached, turning 50, it was like, okay, what am I doing, and am I making the world better? And I concluded that my last job was helping brands measure and optimize media spend online. So I thought we're probably not making the world a lot too much better, but maybe there's got to be a better way to have a focus on significance, not just success. Kind of the second half of my career. So over a dozen years ago, a friend of mine had told me about the benefits of charitable stock gifting. And when he told me about it, I thought it really sounded too good to be true, that if you own stock for a long time, it's appreciated quite a bit. If you sell it, you got to pay taxes on it and then give the proceeds, the net proceeds back to the charity. But if you donate it, then you don't have to pay the capital gains tax. They don't have to pay it. So it's really a transfer of wealth from the IRS to the nonprofits, and much more tax advantage for donors, much better for nonprofits. And you also get to itemize the full, the current market value of the stock. So it seemed too good to be true. And it was, then I discovered why no one does it. One, not many people are aware of it. It's kind of still one of the best kept secrets in personal finance. But secondly, it was a painstaking manual process. It took me hours over several days to execute this, between calls and emails and filling out forms and faxing. It was such a hassle. I just said, I'm not going to do this again. So that was probably early 2000s. And then you get into, it was 2020. I was thinking about that. I assumed somebody had actually made it easy by then, and found it. When I realized no one had, that to me was like the light bulb. I was like, I want to do something different. I really want to do something that has some positive impact and make it a little better. While at the same time, I've always also thought about how can I have the most impact as a volunteer, as someone to support worthy causes. If I mentor one kid, that's great. I can have an amazing impact on one life, but how can I impact a lot of lives? So this kind of was really where a lot that those circles kind of overlap between personal purpose and mission. What am I good at, and where can we actually have an exciting commercial opportunity while doing a lot of good? So that's really kind of the origin of how Donate Stock came to be. That was in 2020, and then really started working on that end of the year. And we kind of the rest I can tell you about is throughout the interview here. But it's just a really fun opportunity to bring innovation and better ways of doing things, and borrowing best practices from proven business models in the tech and the consumer and B2B space, and apply that for nonprofits and helping them unlock a new source of funding, while at the same time helping their donors make smarter, more tax advantaged gifts. So It's really, we couldn't ask for a better job.
Yeah, no, it's so good. I mean, I love when the two, the nonprofit and the for-profit sector can take the best from each other and, build things that are better. But it brings up a question. It's like, what is the reason that there's such a lack of innovation in the nonprofit sector?
Yeah.
That like leads to the follow-up question, which is like, why did it take so long for a solution like donate stock to exist?
There's no one answer for that. I think there's many reasons, and I'll share my thought. Of course, it's just my own personal perspective. One is, I think most people assume nonprofit means you can't make any money in the nonprofit space. And so at the end of the day, if you want to attract the best, the brightest, most innovative people who are thinking differently, taking different approaches to solve problems, generally you have to hire them away from very lucrative commercial opportunities in the for-profit space. So that's one challenge. I think I generally think that there's a lot of people with a lot of heart in this industry, but generally speaking, they're not the best and the brightest who leave, who turn down, significant opportunities to come help a nonprofit operate better, or to help, with fundraising, which is again only become an old industry, but at the same time, it's huge. It's, you and I both came out of advertising and technology and media, which is, I think the US market's around 250 billion. Think of all the advertising that you see. It may be a little bit bigger now, closer to 300, but charitable giving is a $500 billion industry. It's a massive market that most people don't realize it's so big and so ripe for innovation and disruption in a positive way, not disruption to put companies out of business, but disrupting old ways of doing things. But it does take people who have passion, innovation, vision for doing things differently, and really an important ability to execute and make those things come to life. Because there's a lot of, there's in the for-profit and nonprofit space, probably more in the for-profit, there's a lot of great ideas that never really came to fruition, never really, met the promise of the original vision of what inspired people to do it in the first place. So it still takes, not only vision and thinking differently about ways to do things, but the ability to execute and actually bring those things, to life and make them truly have impact. So it's hard to do in for-profit or nonprofit. I think it's harder in nonprofit just because it is a different industry that a lot of people think of as something, when I'm older, I'll give back, right? Versus I want to start a career or build a career in the nonprofit space. I think it suffers a little bit from a branding problem, that there's not great opportunities in it. Whereas we see, a ton of opportunities. And I think it's an amazing industry to be in, especially, because everyone's also so collaborative. Like I refer to our histories, our backgrounds. You worked in an agency, I worked for an ad tech company that's service agencies, incredibly competitive. People did not collaborate. Companies that competed were not even friends, right? You'd see them at a trade show and you wouldn't even talk to them. Whereas in our industry, like everybody is working towards a common good. Everyone's there to help nonprofits raise the money to perform their mission and help the people, their stakeholders and their communities and the people they serve. And there's a lot of great collaboration that takes place. And so it's a smaller group of players in the space, and they're very pro-mission. We're all part missionary, a little bit of mercenary, meaning we're also about making things happen. So there's all the ingredients are there. I think it just needs more, better branding to attract more people into a space that actually, I would say, is much more opportunistic and much more exciting than, a lot of, think of like media or advertising or marketing technology. Having spent 20 years in that, like this is to me so much more rewarding and exciting.
Do you think that, over the last 2.5 years, especially, there's been a big shift? And, again, referencing the industry that we just both know so well, that there's been a big shift in this idea of like, what am I doing? Why am I doing it? And valuing things outside of just how much money you make. And also what you give up to make that money, right? Like the other things, other factors in your life that are important. Like, have you seen a shift being in a unique position of like a for-profit within the nonprofit industry in people who are being attracted to this industry that maybe wouldn't have otherwise prior?
Well, I'm new to it. Like I got into it in 2020, right? In the height of the pandemic is when we started working on this. So I don't really have a very good view before, other than what I remember as a kid, And let's just say that the level of operational expertise I see today is much better than what I saw years ago, where again, people with a lot of heart, but maybe not a whole lot of, really proven business, black belts and operational efficiency, doing the work. So I think it's gotten a lot better. I mean, I see the level of professionalism is absolutely, I think it seems to be on the rise. I think of, for example, one of my friends and who now, she came out of the for-profit space to run a nonprofit in Miami, great organization called Chapman Partnership. And that was really her first foray in the nonprofit space. And then 4 years into it, I think she was recruited away to, run United Way for Miami, the Miami region now. So, and she had 20 plus years of success in corporate management with large companies and entrepreneurial companies. And now she's running a local United Way agency. So, and she's a serious player. Like so I see a lot more of that. I think the nonprofits have realized we need to bring in some people who have had success, are looking to give back. Is it accelerated by the pandemic? I think so. I think the whole, the great resignation of people deciding I'm just not going to do what I did before. I want more lifestyle design opportunities, better balance, be remote. I think that absolutely, it manifests itself in other ways. Namely, people say, I want to do something that matters. And that was our experience. And I think that's probably, fairly common.
I agree. So the other interesting thing is unique probably to donate stock. So I'm curious about your perspective on it, is the challenges that nonprofits face, even when they're successful in fundraising, in the restrictions of the funding that they get access to, and then their limitations in being able to use that to be competitive in the job market, among other things.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about the process for, and this is kind of tactical, but also I think touches on a bigger subject, but what is the process for the restrictions or lack thereof when people are donating stock?
Yeah, for stock gifting, it's pretty black and white. It's frankly pretty easy. The IRS provides really unique advantages to donating stock or any appreciated asset. It could be crypto, it could be your car, it could be art, it could be whatever, as long as there's a way for someone to provide a fair market determination of that value, and then obviously for a way to liquidate it so it turns into something they can pay salaries with, i.e. cash. So for stock, it's really easy. If you've owned the stock more than 12 months and it's appreciated, then you can sell the stock or donate the stock, not sell it. You donate it, and then you avoid the tax on the gain, as well as you get to itemize the deduction. But you just have to own it more than a year. It has to be traded security, a publicly traded security, generally speaking, unless you have a way to value that stock. So we get asked from time to time, like someone who owns stock in a private company, like a startup or a founder. Today, that's a little difficult to do because you have to literally have a third party value that, and you have to find someone who will actually buy that private stock, a non-registered security, which is kind of challenging. So there's a lot more friction there. Charitable stock gifting has been around for decades, at least 3 decades. You've been able to donate stock to charities. It's just never taken off because 1, very few donors are aware. 2, the process for donor is really challenging. And 3, it's really difficult for the nonprofits as well. So, and exactly your question, but I'll just kind of flow into it if that's okay. The challenge for the nonprofits is 99% can't get a brokerage account. If you're a small nonprofit, you contact E-Trade, Vanguard, Schwab. Think of your TD Ameritrade. Think of your kind of standard retail brokerages. They have a lot of costs to manage the compliance to be able to receive stock gifts for a small nonprofit, just because there's a much higher propensity for fraud historically compared to other types of companies. So they have a cost of opening that account and maintaining that account, yet small organizations don't typically build assets. They just receive some stock, they sell it, and move the cash out to the bank account. So there's really no business opportunity for the brokerages and servicing the small nonprofits. So historically, like I said, 99% plus can't even get a brokerage account, so you can't receive stock if you don't have a brokerage account. So that was one problem we found. And the other was that even those that do receive stock, it's really difficult to process because the stock, nothing about the donor travels with the stock. If I donated stock to your organization, all you would see is 10 shares of Apple showed up. You wouldn't know it's from me. Even though I filled out a form and I think that I assume my identity travels, you don't know it came from me. So if I'm sitting around waiting for you to thank me for my gift, you're not going to know it's me. It's not until I reach out to you after the fact and say, hey, I'd sent you $1,500 in stock for Apple. It would be nice to get a thank you note or something, can I at least get a receipt? And that's when they say, oh, thank you for telling us. We didn't know it was yours. Let us go research it and get back to you. So it's just a really, it's a very archaic process filled with friction that is made difficult for nonprofits. That's why they've not been typically very aggressive in promoting stock gifting, because it's really hard for them to process.
Right.
And it's, even though they know it's more tax advantage, it's bigger gifts. They're generally those that do it generally, excluding like the top, 1% of the nonprofits, most that do it's just a one-off thing. A board member wants to give them stocks. They arrange for that, but it's like 1 or 2 gifts a year. It's not something that's a mainstay part of the fundraising program. And that's really what we're trying to change by making it easy for donors, easy for nonprofits, accessible to all nonprofits. Then we think we can really unlock and make it a big part of everyone's kind of think of a balanced approach to fundraising. It's just one of the layers.
Yeah, no, we love that. I mean, for us, we look at it the same way when we're looking at clients that we can work with or how to support the clients that we already have, which is like, how do we make sure that the portfolio is balanced the way that you would look at your, regular investment portfolio.
Yep.
And I think that having more, then you're kind of working within the same players, right? Like large major donors, grants, corporate, government, all the different pieces, and then kind of like the small individual gifts. And so being able to add in these new chunks of like stock or crypto really creates a great opportunity for risk mitigation. And then also the efficiencies of, how you get there, right? Like being able to, put a button on your website and then drive some marketing and making some of your large donors aware that this is available, is, like you said, it's just so much more frictionless than some of the other, opportunities or things that didn't even exist in the past.
Yeah. You did ask a question that I think is really an important point to surface. I'm shining a light on, which is, and this is not my original point of view. I actually got this from Ben Irwin, who runs Charity Buzz. I interviewed him a couple weeks ago, and he said something incredibly insightful, which was that today they rate nonprofits based on how much of their budget goes to G&A, salaries of people, versus directly to the causes they support. And it's really a bad metric if you think about it. If you hire really good people that cost more, but they can have a 5 or 10x impact on, in executing the mission, your G&A cost might be more, but you can be so much more impactful with your in executing your mission, right? So it's not always the money that they put in the communities. It could be the programs they create. If you have a program that costs the same amount, but you can have 10x the number of people engaged in it because you have smarter people planning it, marketing it, delivering it, following up on it, cultivating those relationships with the communities and support for your organization, you could have an outsized impact, but actually would look worse in the way that they historically rate nonprofits. So I thought it was really interesting because it's kind of the wrong metric. You could, it's like, it should be about results, right? Like anything else. Like it's not about what do people cost, but how much impact are you having for every dollar that goes into you? And I think that's really ultimately where would be a great new measuring stick. How you get there, I have no idea. Maybe that's something in the future, but it was really insightful because it is it's the wrong measuring stick, right, to evaluate nonprofits. So I think that ultimately they're like, well, we can't, if we spend more on G&A on people, then we're going to look bad in our ratings. But that's a stupid reason not to hire somebody who could actually double or triple or quadruple the impact that you're having with your existing programs today. Right. Think about like hiring a really good marketing person.
Yeah.
Wow. No, it's a lot of overhead, but you can, what if you could triple your fundraising?
For sure.
Triple the impact that you're having in the community that you could service, when that educational program that you're out there doing for your communities is having 5 or 10x the people attend those events because you have better planning, execution, marketing, communication. Those are things that I hope will get kind of reassessed by organizations that rate the nonprofits and will eventually enable people to invest in good people. Let's hire the best. We'll pay them more because we have to get them here, but they can help us be so much more successful as measured by our impact. That'd be an amazing, thing to see happen in the next decade or so.
For sure. And I just can't fathom that with the for-profit sector, with there being more of like what we view as impact becoming an industry, and then the nonprofit and for-profit sectors being like a subset of that when the more that for-profit gets involved and private enterprise gets involved, the more I have to believe that the metric will change naturally, because and that unrestricted funders come in to say like, hey, listen, I want to support, and the way that they generated their wealth was from creating technologies, scaling things like that. They're going to look for different metrics than the old systems that are now living in foundations and and the kind of like the old, like large donor mentality. As that wealth generation transfer happens and the decision makers, are different and they have different backgrounds and grew up in a world where only technology existed to be able to measure outcomes and view things. I just can't fathom that there will be a natural, evolution. Although ideally we see it sooner and it speeds up, because it is, there was a great TED talk, I think it's Dan Marotta, on that exact topic, which is basically like the way we look at, I think the topic, the title is like the way we look at the nonprofit industry is dead wrong. And it's saying that exact thing, that, you wouldn't, that if the overhead, is 1% and it's the bake sale and they, raise $1,000, is that better than the overhead that's, 50%, but they raise $10 million? And just like the way that we analyze things. And that was from a long time ago. Some of these problems that we're talking about today were written in articles 20 years ago.
These are all legacy issues too. Same with the financial system, in terms of the way stock gets transferred and the challenges and the complexities of it. It's just a problem that should have been solved literally 1 or 2 decades ago.
Yeah. So I'm curious, and it's a good segue, because another question I had was really around like, how does the financial advisor role play a part in what you guys do? And when we talk about incentives and alignment and all that, the traditional path is, from what I know being in the business and also what I know as having a financial advisor, is like this donor advised fund route. And kind of like, so the question, I guess, is from a financial advisor perspective, what is the previous path and kind of like the natural habit of where people were donating? I can't imagine they didn't know that you could donate stock, or hope that they knew that. How has that evolution been?
How much time do we have here?
Let's go. We'll double. We just doubled it.
So this is actually a really important topic, because I read this article earlier this year in Bloomberg about how there's a study that basically, and the guy who wrote the article was just, really kind of criticizing financial advisors for not being more proactive in recommending tax advantage strategies to their clients. It was a spectrum study that found that 90+% of clients of financial advisory clients expect to get tax advice, tax advantage giving advice from their advisor. But and with that, stock gifting, donor advised funds were kind of the top 2 things. But only 25% actually claimed getting recommendations or getting advice from their advisors. So there was this big gap, and the question is why? And so the cynics will say, oh, they don't want to lose assets, right? They're trying to build assets. They don't want to donate the assets. And that's not it. I interviewed probably close to 10, 12. And the resounding answer was, it's a lot of time. It's a lot of work. If I tell all my clients, hey, you should do charitable stock gifting this year, every one of them is going to reach out to me and say, great, I'm over concentrated in Microsoft. Take 10,000 and I want to give 2,000 to each of these 5 charities. Go do that for me. And all of a sudden they have all this work to do. And it is a lot of work to contact each nonprofit, get their DTC, their brokerage information, tell them who the donor is, the specifics of that. A lot of times they forget to do that because they're in a hurry and they have other things to do. Then they go initiate the gift, and then and that's just for one. And it's a lot. It's hours and hours and hours of work. So basically, the advisors, if asked, they're like, "Oh yeah, it's a good idea, and we'll try to. And here's a form you can do it." But most of them just don't say anything. So what we realize is they're really the key to unlocking this early stage of the market to get more adoption. Is people who have advisors have more assets, have managed portfolios, are better, more likely have higher propensity to make larger gifts to nonprofits, and stock is the most tax advantaged way for them to give. Right. It's their funding, it's their portfolio. It's not money they're paying bills with or paying the mortgage with or have to pay a credit card bill next month. It's literally just assets have been growing over time, especially after the last, this last 6 months have been pretty dicey, 10 months now, 11 months since the market peaked in November last year. But we had 13 years prior to that of just up and to the right, just where incredible wealth was created. So even with the setbacks and the markets and the corrections, there's still most people who have been in the market 5, 10, 15 years are still have dramatic gains that they're trying to figure out what to do with. So we view that as a big opportunity. We're actually rolling out a new product for advisors to make it easy for them to initiate gifts on behalf of their clients, not have to go track down every nonprofit, but in one place, initiate all their gifts for all their clients in one place. And then we would inform the nonprofits. We can provide all the reporting, the notifications, and even the acknowledgement letters back to the donor, so that the advisor really doesn't have to do a lot of work. So we view them as critical to this. And historically, there's really been two ways. The donor advised funds are they haven't been around forever. They've only been around, I think, around like 15 years, maybe not even that long. They're a relatively new instrument, but they're great tools, right? And they're generally people who have a really big liquidity event. They sold their business or they won the lottery or something. Like they're like, hey, I just inherited some money. I've got to figure out what to do with this. It's a great way to put a big chunk of assets or cash, in a tax advantaged account, so you don't have to pay the tax on it, and then give that out over multiple years. There's a few things though that there are some limitations on it or restrictions that technically the donor advised fund administrator gets to choose where the money goes. You can make recommendations, you can make requests. Some DAFs are incredibly flexible. Fidelity Charitable, of course, they can accommodate pretty much any approach you want. They're one of the more flexible, larger ones, but a lot of them are like, hey, here's your choice. Like we're kind of limited on where that money can go. So if you want to donate to your kid's school or your local church that isn't even set up as a 501c3, most churches are not, then you can actually, stock gifting is a better way to do that. So what I do is direct these 10 shares of Tesla or Apple. I want to give these to my local church or my kid's school for fundraiser. So that's really where the direct stock gifting comes in. So they're each different approaches to solve, to solve a similar problem, which is how do I make more tax advantage giving? It's just one's really more generally used by higher worth individuals. A lot of DAFs, especially with the financial service organizations, the large ones have like a minimum. I talked to a guy with, one of the big kind of bulge bracket wealth management firms yesterday. They have a 20K minimum for their DAF. But if somebody wants to do a 5K stock gift, like he can't help them, right? So it's without going through that kind of the old process, and that's just a lot of work for them too. So we feel like we're filling gaps, and also I view us as like we're the gateway to a DAF. If you a lot of people are like, oh, I'm not super wealthy, DAF's not for me, but I'll give a $5,000 stock gift to a local organization or shelter or homeless organization here in town. They are actually a DAF prospect. And so we can actually, ultimately be a gateway to that. It's like, hey, if you're interested in this, here's another way, another instrument. So we're all working towards the same goal. I think fairly collaborative, which has been great. We've worked with, a lot of donor advised funds and community foundations that they make their money as DAFs, a lot of them. So they have their own local fund. It's really a donor advised fund you putting into, and put the money in the community. So they're great instruments. And I think, again, it's a 1% tool. My hope is that over the next 10 years, 10, 15, 20% of investors, and there's 60 plus million today, over 50 million households, are actually donating stock either through a DAF or directly to the causes they care about. That would be for us, that would be success. That's tens of billions of funding for nonprofits that has just been kind of untapped today.
It's interesting. The whole DAF conversation, which could be a whole other conversation as well, is very fascinating to me. And just to see the shifts, the trends, we look in the databases of where giving has gone over the past, 10 or 20 years. And then since DAFs have been around, just watching this major shift from individual, giving to individual nonprofit organizations versus the money that's now amassing itself in these donor advised funds. Yeah. That don't currently have any, any structure around when it needs to leave the fund.
Yeah, that's what makes
for the
it a
industry.
little controversial right now. There's a lot of people who believe that you should have a much shorter tail for making those contributions. They should shorten that from, I think it's 4 years to, maybe 12 months, right? Like you should find a home for it pretty quickly.
Yeah.
Otherwise it grows tax-free. It's great for the donor, right? And then every time as it grows and you contribute more, that's more tax benefits to you. Right. So it's a really a great tool for wealthier households.
Right.
It is. It'll be interesting to see if it holds up over the in the next decade or so, or if regulators say, put that money to work faster. It's basically a pre-tax savings account right now.
Yeah.
Accrues benefits in terms of benevolence, but also tax advantages that not everyone has access to.
Right. Yeah. That's that piece that you brought up earlier. And that we, that's in the manifesto of what we do in this show, which is how do you align mission, metrics, and incentives? And I think when there's these slight tweaks to things where it's this incentive right now is a little bit more tied to it staying in there longer than it is into getting it out and putting it to work, which is what the promise of the fund is. So it's an interesting, like when you kind of like, you guys found an unlock, right? Like you found this unlock that's like this money that was sitting there that just needed somebody to unlock the efficiency of the process. So it's interesting. It'll be exciting because I think there's just more attention on this industry right now, and the more attention there is, then the more that, that innovation, is
that's created. Great. I mean, it's interesting just observing all these new kind of neo-DAFs that have come out, the charity vests, the Daffies, givings, that are basically digital wallets, right? So you can put money in, and you employee giving plans, right? There's a lot of those kind of go into a DAF for those employees that they can distribute their money, tax-free, pre-tax from their paycheck, put it in there. It's interesting to see all these new instruments coming out for ways to unlock generosity. And I think that is what's interesting. And a lot of the folks who are in this industry now doing this are coming from other industries, right? So we're coming from the MarTech side. I see people coming from either, e-commerce or retail into this space, because everyone's like, wow, there's so much opportunity, to play catch up in this industry relative to, relative to any other industry. I don't know, I feel like this one's kind of behind. There's a lot of nonprofits that it amazes me. Like I know one here in town they've got like a $7 or $8 million budget. You can't even donate online to them. They don't even have an online donation button. Yeah. I went in there to look at it the other day. I was like, are you kidding me? I literally have to contact you to make a donation. This is 2022. I get it in 2002. The internet's new, but we're 20 years into online giving. But there's still some that are just still, they're understaffed, overwhelmed. They're, fighting fires every day. So it's not their fault, but I do see just this significant opportunity to help reduce the gap and help them be more proactive and more impactful.
I agree. And I think it tees up the next and kind of, of course, not surprisingly, this flew by. And now I feel like we'll get one more juicy subject in and then our time will be up. I'm curious from your perspective, right? You've entered in the industry fairly recently with a very unique perspective and have, you guys have done really, really well in a short period of time, which has given you a view on more of the industry than probably most people would have had in that period of time. What in your mind or what predictions do you have? So we would say, what do you think the future of impact is? But I'm curious as to your 3 to 5 year view, where do you see the industry headed, and what predictions would you make?
I think a few things are, I think the access to knowledge and information and best practices is so much greater than it used to be. So everyone is hearing of all of the great things everyone else is doing, right? And they're seeing the leaders, do really well with their programs. I think ultimately one of the biggest challenges in the industry is there's just too many nonprofits. You have too many organizations doing the same thing in the same markets, and they're all fighting for the same share of wallet of the local donor base. And I've heard some really smart people saying they need to consolidate. They need to say, there's no sense in us having, if we're both supporting pet shelters here locally in our city, for us to have separate G&A organizations, separate, marketing, accounting, administrative, operations, development, executive teams. And we just can't have the same impact. Whereas they should be thinking about how do we join forces, work together, and get more efficiencies out of our organization so we can be a bigger organization with a much larger budget. We can hire better people. We can actually be much more impactful. 1 and 1 equals 3 in this case, the synergy of putting these things together. I think on paper that should happen. It just should happen because there's just not enough funding for all the organizations in this country. Right. Will they, will pragmatism win over ego? I don't know. We'll see.
Well, also, who's the decision maker in that place, right? When you talk about mergers and acquisitions and roll-ups and everything,
someone's got to run it. Yeah.
Yeah. In other industries, there's, the big guy kind of swallows up the little guy, or
I can see boards say, you're on the board of this org, I'm on the board of this org. We're each doing fundraisers. I can't go to yours because we've got ours that weekend. There happen to be the same weekend. It's why not just put these things together? It makes a lot more sense. And then the organizations that you support have then, it's easier for them too. It's better for the community because then they're not having to whose event is this, et cetera. So I think a lot of people predict consolidation. I think it should happen. I just don't know if it will. Yeah. I think a lot of nonprofits are just going to become, I think of the million, I heard the last number is like 1.7, 1.8, 1.9. It's hard to say because IRS is always kind of behind and they're reporting their numbers.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure exactly what the number is, but I think I would venture to guess 70% of those are just kind of technically viable, alive, but not really operational. And again, no data to support that. Just I look at how many, I know several people who have a nonprofit. It's like their horse, for they're an equine support organization and it's one person, right? And I'm like, they're not technically they're a 501c3, but they're not really doing anything. I think what we should see is a winnowing and a narrowing of the number out there that can have more impact. Like if you compare it like to the UK, where they have a fraction of the organizations and they're all much bigger and they all have much larger budgets, bigger staffs, and a lot of them work really closely with the public authority, with the government.
Mm-hmm.
They're much more aligned with them. So I'm not saying we should be that, but I think probably somewhere in between. We're like so free market that anybody can do it, but
yeah,
it doesn't mean everyone should, because there's just not enough supporters. I have kind of a not so great prediction about this year. I think this year is going to be a tough year for fundraising. If you look at the growth in individual giving all these years, you look last year, I don't have the numbers off the top of my head, but I think individual giving grew last year by something, maybe 10 billion, something like that, from like 290 to 300 or something like that. There's about 5 people that accounted for about 40 billion in gifts.
Yeah.
You think of Mackenzie Scott, Musk, Bezos, Gates. If not for the generosity, the super outsized generosity of a few people, we would have seen a contraction in giving last year.
Right.
I don't know
in addition
if they're giving,
to probably the very strategic reason they gave, because you have to at the end of the day, obviously people have good hearts, but when there's that much wealth generation in a short period of time because of what was going on in the world, they also have to offboard that wealth generation. So it's like, if they don't have to offboard that in the next couple of years at such a great rate, even they won't be giving the way they've given the past couple of years.
I wrote an article for Bloomberg, 6 weeks ago about Elon Musk. He gave $5.5 billion of stock last year, and to probably his own foundation to distribute somewhere. But it's because he exercised 19 billion in stock options he was going to lose, so he had to exercise that. He got a $19 billion gain. 30% AGI, which is the limit for non-cash gifts. He gave exactly that. He gave $5.5 billion. Now on that, he saved $4.8 billion in taxes. Yeah. So he literally donated $5 billion over 5, got 80% of that back in tax, either avoidance or tax savings, to offset the the tax on his $19 billion stock gain. That's not happening this year. I don't think he's given anything this year. I'm probably sure he's probably given all he is for a few years. But I think this is going to be a tough year. And I hear this. I know some people that run nonprofits are like, we're way behind. Our numbers are way down. We're going to definitely and they're going to have to lay people off, which is really, it's like it's a salt in the wound. Not only is there not enough budget to do their mission, but to cover their overhead, they're going to have to let people go. So I worry that nonprofits have been, after the shock of, the pandemic was really bad for a subset of the nonprofits, performing arts, or those that relied on in-person experiences for their fundraising events. It was phenomenal for a lot of others, right? That all of a sudden had this outpouring of support to go do their mission. But I think after years and years and years of just kind of up and to the right giving numbers, I think this year is going to be, unfortunately, a dose of cold water on fundraising. So, but hopefully from that, it will be the kind of the signal or the clarion call that we've got to do things better. We have to reevaluate, reassess. How do we become better at fundraising? How do we become more donor centric? We can't say this has always been our donor, this persona. Let's just keep, it's not, you hear these stories. It's not the 60-year-old male, it's the 42-year-old female that drives most of the giving decisions. That's not a real stat. These are stories I've heard. Anecdotal as well, based on data, that it's the people that support you, they got to better understand who's supporting them. They got to better understand how to stay in touch with them and communicate with them and engage them and tell stories and maintain a positive relationship with them. And then most importantly, they got to allow them to give what they want, how they want, when they want, and where they want. You can't say, oh, thanks, we need you to send us a check, or thanks, we need you to contact us, directly, call us if you want to donate stock. You've got to make it easy for people to donate what they want when they want. As consumers, we have become so spoiled by e-commerce being so easy that we now kind of apply that prism, that view to everything we do. Like, why isn't this easier? Why is this so hard? Why aren't you more like Amazon? And it's not fair, but at the same time, it is the challenge. Like, how do you become more donor centric in everything you do? And I think that's what's going to probably really be this year, when the capital's just not there, is going to be the opportunity for them to take another look, say, okay, what are we doing? How are we doing it? How do we do better? I know those studies are going on all across the industry right now. Just the last week, I talked to 3 large ones that are all like, we are doing a full end-to-end assessment of everything now, because we have to, otherwise, we can't take many more years like this.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think unfortunately in difficult times is when, industries change and innovation happens.
Yeah.
So it's like the pain that you go through for ultimately, a better result spitting out the other side.
It's necessary. It's the only way sometimes that you stop and say, okay, we need to reassess, and because nothing is static, everything changes, and you have to evolve and with the changing conditions. And so I think it'll be better in the long term, but it's going to be painful for some near term.
Yeah, I agree. Well,
can we end on a brighter note?
With
that was something good we can talk about. Yeah.
Really on a positive note. No, just kidding.
Yeah.
I mean, I think at the end of the day, these are conversations that are really important to have. I just really, really, again, appreciate your time and what you're doing in the industry. So grateful that we got connected, through Aaron, and just that it was an interesting thing that the universe kind of like, we all came from the same place, and now we're brought back together under this umbrella of impact, which is amazing. There was a ton of things. I have all sorts of notes of stuff that we talked about that was really good, and I'm excited for people to hear. But, when I really think about like, what were the key takeaways from this conversation for me, just this, like, you sharing your story in like how you viewed the world and your past experience. And then this idea of unlocking innovation within this industry, and seeing, instead of just like sitting at the top and going, this is what I think everyone needs, really like assessing the landscape and then identifying a really like kind of low hanging fruit opportunity that you could jump on. That is already providing a ton of value for the industry as it relates to, fundraising solutions on both sides of the coin. I also think, the predictions for the industry, you have like a really unique perspective from where you sit and what your experience is. I think this idea of merging and consolidating, nonprofits around the causes that they're there to support and to help solve for is interesting. I agree. It's a challenging one. I would love to see someone really take a stab at that. So if you're out there and you're taking a stab at that, let us know. We want to talk to you. And then also just this idea of like consumer-centric fundraising solutions and just making it as easy as possible for people to give. So yeah, this is coming off of, me speaking on the panel for Stocktoberfest. You will be hearing a lot more about stuff that, we are doing to help support Donate Stock, just because we really believe in what you guys are doing. So for those who though would like to more directly connect with you and learn about the organization and connect with people at your organization, what would be the best way for them to do that?
Just go to donatestock.com. You can contact us from there pretty easily. We're pretty active on Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram. So we're easy to connect.
Cool.
We're everywhere. So please do engage us. We're trying to, there's a lot of nonprofits we'd love to help. So, and this year, like, think of better ways to give, like Donate Stock. It's easy, it's fast, it's safe, it's free on our site. So just, the more we can get that word out, the more we can change behavior and hopefully help unlock a lot more generosity.
Awesome. Well, thank you. And you've been listening to The Future of Impact. To make sure you never miss an episode, subscribe to our show in your favorite podcast player or follow our YouTube channel. Don't forget to follow The Future of Impact on Instagram, LinkedIn, and TikTok for bonus content and sneak peeks on next week's episode. Thank you for listening. And until next time, keep making impact.